everybody, I am here to talk about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. Now, I'm pretty sure I've done a video about this before, but this week on Tuesday, November the 19th of 2024, Pluto is going to be moving into the sign of Aquarius, and he will not be back in the sign of Capricorn for another 250 years. So he's going to be in the sign of Aquarius for 20 years. So this is a big shift. It's one that marks kind of the beginning of another era. Pluto is, the furthest outermost planet in our solar system. Yes, I know there's a whole debate about whether or not he's a planet, but whatever. And so he moves really, really slowly around the zodiac. It takes him 248 years to go all the way around the zodiac. And so we will never see a whole Pluto cycle in our lifetime. And he can spend anywhere from 10 to 20 years in a sign because it's an elliptical orbit, so it's not perfectly circular. So that's why they don't always quite match up the amount of time he spends in a sign. So Pluto's been in Capricorn since 2008. So that is, that's a big amount of time. And before that, he was in Sagittarius since 1995. And before that, he was in Scorpio between 1984 and, is it 1984? I think it's in 1995, or is it 1980? Anyway, he's the early 80s, till 1995. Before that, he was in Libra during the 70s. So you can see like it kind of denotes like an era, and it defines generations. It is it is a big shift in the energies. Now, that does not mean that big dramatic things are going to happen right on November 19th, but we are moving into a new era. Now, Pluto, because of retrogrades, Pluto only moves, he only moves like a couple of degrees a year. And because of retrograde cycles, he spends about half the year in retrograde. We did have Pluto in Aquarius very briefly in 2023. He went into Aquarius very briefly. It was like April, May, June of 2023. And that I like to think of as kind of like the trailer of what was going to come for Pluto in Aquarius. And then he moved back into Aquarius again in January of this year. And he was in Aquarius until the beginning of September. Now he's been in Capricorn. He retrograded back into Capricorn in September. And it's kind of like when you move back, when you're moving houses and you have to go back to your old house and clean it up before you fully move into the other one. That's what he's been doing. He's been cleaning things up in the Capricorn sign. And now he's going to go into Aquarius, and he's not going to go back into Capricorn. He is going to be in Aquarius until 2044. So this is the start of like a new era, kind of a start, because we already had a bit of a start in January this year. So think about some of the themes that occurred last spring and also this year, and just know that those themes for you are what's going to continue on into those Aquarius years. Now, if you know your chart, if you're somebody who knows your astrology birth chart, you can look at the house ruled, the Aquarius house in your chart, which is like if you don't know, an astrology chart looks like a wheel that's divided into 12 sections. And each of those sections is a certain sign if you're doing whole sign charts. And so you have to look at that house to see like, and each house or piece of the pie rules a different part of your life. So for example, if let's say Aquarius is your first house, then Pluto going through Aquarius will affect your sense of self, your sense of identity. If Aquarius is your 7th house, which is partnerships and relationships, it might mean some changes in your relationships with others, in your partnerships. If Aquarius is your 10th house rules career, public face, you're going to see some changes over the next 20 years in that area. Again, doesn't mean changes are happening overnight, but it does mean that things are going to change over time. I mean, just think of, the Pluto and Capricorn era since 2008, all of the changes that have occurred in your life since 2008. They didn't all happen like right on the day, right? But they happened slowly over that period of time as Pluto moved through Capricorn. So it's a big shift. It's a big deal. When we look at Pluto and the cycles that he makes, we often look at where, what happened when he was last in that sign, or, the time before that when he was in that sign, to know what some of the themes are. Pluto as a planet obviously rules death. He's the lord of death. So he sweeps away the things that no longer are needed. He is change, irrevocable change, that, once something's gone, it is gone, with Pluto. Pluto is also about power. It shifts where power is in our society. It also has to do with Pluto often exposes how power has been abused, because Pluto rules the underworld. And so he knows about the secrets that people want to hide. And so he often reveals those things to us as he goes through that sign, what that sign rules and how that power has been corrupted. Pluto, is also the subconscious. He's also the underworld, and the sense of, like, much like the moon is sort of our subconscious as well. Pluto's like our collective subconscious and our fears as well. He is what we fear. So when Pluto was in Capricorn, power was in the hands of those who, who had traditional kind of power. So because Capricorn is a very traditional type sign, it's very hierarchical, and so it was about government and big business and banks, right? And we saw like the rich get richer. We saw the rise of like populist and fascist type governments. We also saw that, banks had a lot of power, but it also revealed to us like how that power was being abused. In 2008, when Pluto moved into Capricorn, we had the financial crisis happen, and we had banks fall. We had, again, it was a big financial crisis. And so people became very aware of how power had been misused and corrupted, in these areas. And we had, the whole 99% movement, or, like we had, the Wall Street protests and everything. People being very aware of how power was being abused and corrupted by those who had too much money. And we've seen the rich just get richer over this period of time. Pluto and Capricorn also, Capricorn is about boundaries, and we saw like tightening of borders. We saw, border walls being erected, very, Capricorn type energies going on. Pluto and Capricorn, as well, we started to have things like the Me Too movement and things where people were showing like how, power of those in authority had been used and abused. Now we have Pluto going into Aquarius. And so again, we look to clues from the past to see what that might mean for us as we go forward in the next 20 years. So the first thing that Pluto in Aquarius seems to have some themes in is the theme of rebellion and revolution. So when Pluto was last in Aquarius, which is at the end of the 1770s into the 1780s and early 1790s, this was the end of the American Revolution and the formation of a new political entity, which was the United States, right? So that was a big change. That was a big revolution. We also had the French Revolution. The French Revolution, unfortunately, also resulted in the Terror revolutions. People like to be nostalgic and to glamorize revolutions, but they're actually quite terrible for most people. But there was the French Revolution. People got tired of like the people in authority having too much money and too much power, and there was a revolution. And then we also had the Haitian Revolution as well, which was enslaved people rising up against, their French masters at the time and overthrowing them. Now, revolution did not happen everywhere in the world. These are 3 examples, but it didn't happen everywhere. But those revolutions really changed some of the zeitgeist of the time and the mindset of the time. Other governments became worried about these things, and it forced them to enact, various, changes in their governments or reformations. And so there is this theme of like people rebelling against those who had too much authority during the Pluto and Capricorn eras. And so we may see some of those themes play out over the next 20 years. And if you look at the time before that, in the 1500s, when Pluto was in Aquarius before that, this is the era of the Protestant Reformation. This is the era of like, Luther, banging his thesis onto the door, nailing it to the door of the church, his little manifesto or whatever. This, and that really revolutionized things. That changed the way people think. Instead of the power being in the church and being in authority, it was all of a sudden it was like, maybe we can look at religion in our own way and interpret it in our own way, in our own needs. So we have that. We also had like Henry VIII, rebelling against the Catholic Church because he wanted to marry Anne Boleyn. So you had these kind of like shifts in mindset going on during Pluto and Aquarius eras. The other thing that happens is technological revolutions. So the last time we had Pluto in Aquarius, we had the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. We had inventions like, the steam engine and the cotton ginny that really revolutionized things and changed the way we work. It changed the fabric of society. It changed, people started moving into cities more. We were able to, transportation became, quicker in a lot of ways. It really changed things, both good and bad. But it changed things, and it changed our society. We went from more agricultural society to an industrialized society. And the same thing happened the time before that with the invention of the printing press, and all of a sudden reading materials became more available. And that also, kind of fueled the Protestant Reformation, all of those things. So technology really changing our lives and changing the fabric of society. So it'll be interesting to see what technologies come along that change things. Of course, everyone's talking about AI. And so we'll see if that's the thing. There may be other things that come along that really change the fabric of society and change the way we work. Just a lot of change coming up because of technology, because Aquarius tends to rule things in technology. And so we'll see some technological innovations, I think, coming up over the next several years. Again, whether it's good or bad is to be seen, and also depends on where you are and what you do, whether or not it's good or bad for you. But I do think there are going to be technological changes, innovations, and leaps forward in science and chemistry and technology are often associated with Pluto and Aquarius periods. Again, the last time Pluto's Aquarius was the invention of vaccines. And vaccines, as much as I know right now, there is a lot of horrible misinformation about vaccines going on. Vaccines save lives. They've saved countless lives. It eradicated smallpox. Vaccines are actually quite an old technology. And that was a huge step forward. We also had inventions like the hot air balloon and the bicycle, or the beginnings of the bicycle. It was a rudimentary bicycle, but we had hot air balloons come along. We had bifocal glasses. I remember reading some of these inventions and being like, really, that's from that time. Very interesting. So there's leap forwards with technology, with discoveries in chemistry, in medicine, that often come along with Pluto and Aquarius periods, because Aquarius is a very scientific sign. It's a sign, it's an air sign, it's an intellectual sign. So we're going to see some leap forwards in technological advancements for people. Another theme that seems to be coming up, it's not so much in the past, but no, it's sort of a weird connection with the past. But I noticed during Pluto in Aquarius in 2023 and then earlier this year, a lot of themes around space and aliens seem to be coming up. I'm not saying aliens are coming to Earth, but I think there's a lot of interest in that. We've also seen, that there are, some private businessmen who are investing a lot in rocket technology and things about going to space. So I think the theme of space is going to be one that comes up. A loose connection with the past is that these are times of encountering alien other worlds. And when I say alien, I mean different, as in the 1500s was a time of exploration. This is time when Europeans got into ships and started going to parts of the world they hadn't been before and discovering things, because of course people already lived there. But you know what I mean. They got into ships and they're like, oh, there's these new people that I didn't know before, this new place I didn't know before. But we also had in the 1700s, we started to have expansion further into what was the New World. So it's kind of this sense of expansionism that isn't always great for, people on the other end, let's face it, right? But it is a time when we expand our boundaries of what we know, or what the known world is for us. So I think space and exploring things might be a huge thing that comes up over the next 20 years. The other thing is community, because Pluto in Capricorn, Capricorn's very much about the people with traditional authority. Aquarius is about regular people, and it's about developing communities. And I think that's something that counteracts sort of that hierarchical authority that Capricorn has, and that imbalance. Because I think we do need like hierarchies in order to function, especially in larger societies. They are necessary. The problem is when it gets too much power or that power is corrupted or abused. Pluto and Aquarius will be more about people and more about communities. Now, the interesting thing is that Pluto also shows where power gets corrupted. And Aquarius tends to rule technology. And so I think it'll be interesting over the next 20 years. We might really see how those who have a lot of power, especially tech giants, we think about the big companies, we think about, people with the social media platforms, we think about like Twitter and Meta and Google and Apple and all these Microsoft, all these companies that have an inordinate amount of power these days because we are so reliant on their technology. We're going to, I think, find out more about how technology has been abused against people, surveillance, all those kind of things. I think those issues are really going to come to the fore and really come up over the next 20 years. So that's what I am seeing for the themes for Pluto and Aquarius. When it comes to your own life, remember Pluto rules very large things that are going on, tends to affect things more in the world on a large scale. In our individual lives, it may not affect us as much. It really depends on your chart. It depends, look at your Aquarius house, what area that's ruling. That will show you, where changes are going to happen over the next 20 years. Remember, it's 20 years. It's a long time. The other thing is Pluto transits. This is where Pluto, as he moves, he hits certain points in your birth chart, certain planets, certain placements, may activate change in your personal life. But overall, Pluto tends to do things on the world scale. So I don't want people to think like, oh my God, Pluto goes in Aquarius on November 19th, everything's going to change on that date. No, it's not. It's slow change over time. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. I'm all very curious about how it's all going to go down. It's important to remember too that Pluto is making a return to where it was. Pluto in Capricorn, right at the end of Capricorn, was the Pluto return for the United States. A return is when a planet goes back to where it was at the start of something. So, for example, a solar return is when the sun returns to where it was on your birthday. It's your birthday. It does that every year. Pluto was back at the point it was during the American Revolution, and now it's going to Aquarius, which is the founding of this new country. And so I think there is, obviously, I think you don't have to be an astrologer to know that there are going to be some really profound changes, I think, for the United States. Hopefully they will end up, whatever these changes are, being good for everybody in the long run. But we shall see what happens. I have to admit, I'm not just with knots. If you watch my other video, you'll know I'm not super hopeful about where things are going, but we shall see, right? The story is not written yet. So we'll see what's going on with that. Let me know what your thoughts are about Pluto going to Aquarius. Is it something you're concerned about? Is it something that you're excited about? What do you think the themes will be? I would love to hear what your thoughts are. If you want more astrology, I do have on my Patreon weekly astrology reports where I talk about the astrology for the week in detail. You can also sign up on my website for a free newsletter where I give you the headlines for the month, every month, the start of the month. And you can get an astrology reading from me on my Etsy shop. It is back up and running. But I am going to, I think, do some changes on my website so that I'm going to wean myself off of Etsy because I feel like it's taking too much money. But anyway, that's what's going on for me. Let me know what your thoughts are. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Peace and love. And